Welcome, stargazers. This is APM, your intrepid star guide, and we're back with another episode of the Outlaw Astrology Podcast. This is episode 130. Today we're going to continue our journey through the zodiac archetypes with Taurus, the keeper of sacred earth. And some gentle reminders. There is the Outlaw Astrology newsletter and podcast. That link is in the show notes. We have free and paid versions. I put out content practically every week, but for the free version, about maybe 1 to 2 posts per month. So please do check that out. I am active on Instagram at The Outlaw Astrology, YouTube at Outlaw Astrology, and Pinterest at Outlaw Astrology. You can find those links in the show notes as well. Thank you very much for tuning in today, and let's get to it. So, we're going to be talking about embodying the sacred ground. And this is like the cosmic pause. So, Taurus is the necessary stabilizing force that follows Aries' initial burst of creation. The grounding allows form to take shape. I mean, you got the idea. You did the Fool thing. Card 0 in the major arcana is the Fool, and that is the initial spark of energy, very fiery. You leapt off the cliff, you had an idea, you heard the call to action, but now what? What next? I mean, the great idea needs foundations. It needs to be stabilized in the material world, and that is where we get to Venus as a divine manifestation. Now, Taurus's planetary ruler represents the principle that attracts and consolidates resources and transforms energy into matter. So it is the everyday. You love to paint, for example. I do. I love to paint. And you got to set up your workspace. You've got to clean brushes. You've got to clean your workspace after your work. You've got to turn up and actually do the work. That's the Taurus part of the energy. You had the great idea. Now get yourself sat and get to it. That's Taurus energy. Otherwise, it just exists in your head as an idea or a flame in the deepest recesses of your soul burning with no chance of expression. So it means putting in place, getting in action, and having a plan. That's Taurus energy. Now, Venus is about harmony. Venus loves harmony, it loves beauty, it loves delight, it's all about pleasure. And you'll notice this is a very different energy from Mars. Mars energy is very active. It feels potent. It feels powerful. Whereas Venus energy is a little bit more easygoing, a little bit more laid back. You know, it's looking across the table. Hey, does everybody have enough mead? You know, sort of energy. It is turning up, like I said, in your studio, your healing space, your creative space, at opening the doors of your brick and mortar business, because that is the everyday. It is sorting out numbers, how much you need to make on a particular day. It's turning up to do the mundane things that you're not going to see with Aries energy. Aries energy is about blazing a trail and initiating something. It's cardinal fire energy. It's cardinal energy. And cardinal energy initiates, but staying in movement is very difficult for cardinal energy to do, because fixed signs that come behind cardinal energy, they're the stabilizers. They're the ones that sustain things and maintain things. So that idea, that little spark of an idea that Aries grew in the dark, rich soil of its soul, Taurus takes and says, okay, this is what you've given me. It's a little small, a little misshapen. I'm going to need to do some work on this and nurture it a bit with a little soil, a little love, a little TLC, a little care. And we'll see what we can make of this thing. It's being practical, but it's also being embodied. We're bringing in an idea or creative energy into a more material manifestation, which Venus is about beauty. It's about those things. By the way, if you heard pleasure and you thought fifth house, Venus is in its joy in the traditional lineage of astrology, Hellenistic. You will find that Venus is in its joy in the fifth house, and the fifth house gets some of its keywords and themes from Venus. So, moving on. So some of the expressions of Taurus energy would be Demeter or Ceres. Now, Demeter, the story is she was Persephone's mum, whose daughter is kidnapped and taken to the underworld by Hades. Persephone is lost to her mum, she thinks, and her mother goes hither, thither, and yon to find how to get her daughter back, and almost collapses creation until she does so. That's that kind of radicalized energy. That's Demeter energy. So it's about cycles of abundance. And by the way, things do ebb. They do flow. Things lie fallow. As a matter of fact, in farming, gardening, there are times where you let the earth lie fallow, or fields lie fallow, or you don't plant things to give the earth a chance to recover and rest, because even the earth needs rest. As a matter of fact, during 2020, the earth was resting so much that one of the holes in the ozone layers above the Arctic Circle started closing. So that's a period of rest. You might also think of Taurus energy as, because it's a night sign, and Venus is a night planet, it is more restful energy. It is the shadow part to Aries' light. It is that pause. Okay, we've got the idea, all that fermenting energy, and now it's getting stabilized, possibly into something, and we'll find out what that is. So some of the implications would be Demeter and Ceres. They're both different names for the same energy. Demeter is what the Greeks called this goddess and this energy, and Ceres is what the Romans called that energy. And so it's basically also the sacred bull in Mannonian culture. You'll notice if you ever have any fascination with Greek or Roman mythology, or mythology in particular, you'll see a lot of bulls mentioned, which could give you an idea of the time period. I'd say probably in the age of Taurus, but probably not towards beginning, middle. It's kind of hard to sort, but you'll see that energy very common. You also see it in biblical references where they talked about the golden bull, in the case of idolatry, worshipping false idols, and then talking about that idol of a golden bull, because we're moving from that age to another age. And then there's Apis in Egyptian mythology. So you'll see bulls, for example, bull energy is unique because bulls feel and sense their environment with their entire bodies, because they have very poor eyesight and they don't have all the color range that we see. They don't see all those colors. And so that's a different way of viewing the world. They also have their eyes placed a lot wider apart, so they can have that panoramic view around, so they can anticipate danger, which they anticipate with their entire body. So it is an opportunity for Taurus energy to get inside of their own gut, to trust that gut instinct. So that's another intuitive. That's a body sense, letting your body tell you with the sensations that it's feeling what's going on with your world. And so let's build on the hero's resources, okay? And so psychologically, there's a necessity to establish foundations, okay? So the hero has to develop some tangible skills and resources after the initial call to adventure. For example, Harry Potter. Getting that initial call and all the challenges that went with it to be able to attend Hogwarts to begin with, after getting the call to adventure, the letter from Hogwarts, certainly making him aware of the fact that there is a magical world that he did not know of, and that he's actually a part of that magical world. And the Taurus part is having to learn magic, how to cast a proper spell without blowing off your own eyebrows, without turning yourself partially into a cat, because that's a thing that happens when you make polyjuice potion. You Harry Potter fans know what I'm talking about. But those are some of the themes you might see in pop culture. Also, Doctor Strange. The call to action, the call to adventure for him is when he gets into the car accident and can no longer do surgery because of the severe nerve damage to his hands, and he's a surgeon. And it starts him, he refuses to accept that this is the end. He doesn't want to teach. I am a surgeon. I surgery people. That's what I do. And so it starts him going on a spiritual, mystical pilgrimage, which lands him as an apprentice and student to the Ancient One, which is the Taurus part of the story. Him going hither, thither, and yon, and all the way across the world, and spending a lot of his money to find an answer to things that people told him he can't have. That's very Aries. The setting down and the slow learning magic, which he had a challenge with. He's very stubborn. He resisted, persisted in trying to do it his own way, and slowing down was not something he wanted to do. He was in a hurry. Very Aries energy, patience. Slowing down is very Taurus, because Taurus is an earth sign. And it is also a fixed sign, which gives it kind of a stability there, which could make things rather rigid. And so developing tangible skills after the initial call to adventure is how we develop this narrative. Now, Taurus energy is also embodied wisdom. So Taurus energy connects to the intelligence of the physical body in the natural world. And you're going to find that with athletes, because you have to pay attention to your body and the bodies of those around you if you're going to play football, basketball, even in Roman and Greek times with gladiators and all that sort of thing. You're still going to need to be aware. Now, in my own life, I'm a trained dancer and a yoga student. And there is needing to be aware of your body. I also work as a therapeutic body worker and have several certifications. And so that is also an awareness. All of those things are very Taurus embodied. Those are embodied wisdoms. That is physical intelligence, which you find in, as I said, dancers who are athletes, dancers, basketball players, football players. That's embodied wisdom. But it's also your Winnie the Pooh, lost in the forest with Piglet, and that annoying other character that I don't know if he's a cat, what he is, but he's really bossy and annoying. And finally, they're terribly lost in a 100-acre wood, and the bossy character goes off on his own to get home because he's tired of being lost with these two. And finally, Pooh turns to Piglet and said, "Let's go home." And Piglet's like, "We can't, we're lost." And he goes, "Oh, no. I have several pots of honey in my cupboard at home, and they are calling to my tummy." That is Taurus energy. It is embodied wisdom, is being able to slip into your body and sense the sensations. What's going on with your knee? What's going on with your ankle? Do you have a headache? Are your shoulders tight? Are your jaws tight? That is Taurus embodied wisdom. And that is the physical world, but also the natural world. For example, as I've stated, bulls are very intuitive with their bodies. They have an all-over body sense. So that is nature. Also, pigeons. Did you know that pigeons can't bloody get lost? They can't. They've got metal in their beaks that work with the magnetic magnetosphere, the magnetic pull of the earth. And that pull tells the pigeon which way to go. So that is an embodied sense as well. You'll find that sort of intelligence in animals. So if you pay attention, animals will give you embodied natural wisdom. You'll also find this sort of wisdom in... Let me hold off on that for a second. And so let's move on to the paradox of stability. And here's the thing. Authentic security requires both a rootedness and adaptability. Now you'll notice, how can you be rooted and adaptable? Well, imagine fungi. There is a documentary called Fabulous Fungi, I believe. I think it was on Netflix, but if you look it up, you can watch this. And here's why I'm mentioning it. Because they are both rooted and adaptable. In fact, it is theorized by botanists, etc., and other scientists who study such things, that mushrooms millions and millions and millions of years ago taught all other plants how to root. And they are very much an integral part of the root system in old-growth forests and pretty much everywhere else in our ecosystem, including rainforests. Okay, so they're kind of the nervous system of the natural world. And they are both rooted and adaptable, although some of them grow in very unique places. But they're very adaptable. As a matter of fact, plants and trees have their own natural intelligence. They are rooted, but they do communicate with each other. They talk about whether or not there's a fire, whether there was a fire, what's going on in the climate through the root system. And a small tree, for example, and you'd be amazed how many people get this wrong. They'll see a tiny tree next to a really large stately tree and think that poor tree is not going to survive, it's going to die. That big tree is going to get all the sunlight, all the energy, the little tree is going to die. Actually, that's not true. During the summer, when it's warmer, depending on wherever we happen to be on the globe, when it's warm in your section of the world, for you international listeners, that large tree is feeding the baby tree. It's providing nutrients so the tree can grow big and strong, because the natural world does not behave the way human beings do. They're interconnected. They support each other. It is a natural instinct of the natural world to give and to take. And so the big tree satisfies and takes care of the needs of the small tree when it's warm outside and this little tree is not getting as much sunlight and therefore not as much nutrients. During the cooler months, on to colder months, when the big tree doesn't have as much energy and cannot help as much, the little tree, having been fed all summer and all spring and summer, can now return the favor and sustain the big tree through the cold months, because it has fewer branches and fewer resources that it has to tend to like the big tree. So they help each other. That little tree is going to grow, as long as its species does so, into a healthy big tree and will be part of the communication of that copse of trees. By the way, there's a very large copse of trees, about 80,000 years old. It's called, is it Pango? I think it's Pango. And it is one of the oldest copse of trees and old growth, and thereby highly complex. And so the natural world teaches us the complexity and to respect that complexity. But there's also possession and stewardship. And if you come from a place that the land is yours, then you may not embrace and approach stewardship correctly. To see something as yours, and rather than ours, ignores the interconnection and the interconnectedness of Taurus energy, and also stewardship, because we're learning right stewardship. I have a guilty pleasure in that I really, once upon a time, really loved shoes and handbags, and I had quite a few before I downsized myself into a more easy to manage amount. That is called consumerism. And at some point, I was just buying with no consideration. And then I stopped and I said to myself, these boxes and these bags that this stuff is coming in is not great for the environment. And these shoes are fast fashion. And fast fashion, once you toss it away, it ends up in the garbage. But the garbage goes away from you, but it doesn't go nowhere. It goes somewhere. Somewhere away from you, but somewhere. And so there's a desert in South America, I believe. I think it's in South America. It's definitely a desert filled with clothing. There's tons of discarded clothes. And some of our fast fashion ends up in other countries and thereby blights those countries because, fast fashion is easier, cheaper than buying and making your own stuff, which can be a problem economically for countries that don't have the resources of the so-called first world. Okay, so that's what we mean by right stewardship. It's asking yourself the question, do you really need this, or you just want it, which is Mars energy. Venus energy is like, we're only going to get somewhere together. Mars is me first, and Venus is like us. Okay? So let's move on to transcending attachment. And so we're talking about possession. Attachment is another word for that. And some of the shadow expressions of Taurus is stubbornness, materialism, resistance to necessary change, and things of that nature. And a great example from pop culture, and in particular fiction, is The Hobbit, and it's the hobbits in the Tolkien world. They're very much Taurus energy. Why leave your beautiful little home in the Shire to go out on some adventure to chase a ring, or to do this, take the ring over there? I mean, who wants that? You're safe here. You have food and tea, and you've been alive 100 years long, and why do that? So hobbits are very Taurus in their energy. They're interested in enjoying the moment. They're interested in enjoying the physical pleasures that life has to offer, which is very Venus energy and can be very materialistic. Stubbornness, I love it, stubbornism. Stubbornness is not necessarily a bad trait. It is a bad trait, or as in bad trait, negative trait, or a trait that's less useful, if the impetus is saying change is necessary and you keep using the same system over and over again because you don't want to change it. Like, it served me for 20 years, I'm going to keep doing it this way. Like when you go to a company and you say, hey, here's a more efficient way to do this. And everybody at the company poo-poos you and says, we've been doing it like this for 10 years and it works for us, and who are you to come in here and change things? That's very stubborn, resistant to change type Taurus energy. And then there's materialism. Buying things just to buy things, or just because you want it. That's how I ended up with a lot of shoes and a lot of handbags and tons of jewelry that I never wore just because I wanted it, until I started being more intentional with my purchases. And then there's the resistance, as I said, to necessary change. That is, what we're all seeing now in the world, to change back, to turn back time, to go back to some mythological fantasy time when everything was great, the golden age of this, the golden age of that. Back in this time when the nuclear family and this was going on and it was so wonderful and beautiful. That is a resistance to change. We're being moved in a totally different direction. It requires us to have more mindset, to be more mindful about what we buy and whom we buy it from, who's allowed to have luxury and pleasure and who isn't. These are the questions we ask in this time period. And that is a resistance to change. And this stalwart energy is stabilizing, but sometimes too stabilizing. Okay? And so when we can transform our possession into stewardship. Like I said, asking questions, like honoring the resources without being defined or limited by it. Okay, so yes, what is the right use of your money? Who do you want to help? And how do you want to help? Those are Taurus questions, because it'll allow you to slow down and reflect on the energy you put out there and the energy that comes back. And you can check in with your gut. Does that feel right? Does it not feel right? That's very Taurus embodied wisdom. And some of the ways you can do that is being mindful. Checking with your body. Do you have a headache? Do you have tight muscles? Your jaw clench? What's going on with your stomach? Did you eat something your stomach didn't like or didn't agree with? This is embodying Taurus energy because it's making you more aware of your physical body so that it can speak to you and you understand the messages it's trying to share with you without being limited. You can be stubborn without being defined by stubbornness. You can be grounded without being defined by these things. These are traits. As one of my former mentors once said to me, traits are traits are traits. They are not fixed. They are not absolute. The Taurus energy might give you the idea that things are fixed and absolute and more fixed and absolute than they actually are. And so one last thing, there is the spiritual dimension, and it's called the Earth Keeper archetype. So you might see some of the other archetypes for Taurus would be the Steward, the Earth Keeper, the Environmentalist, the Gardener, the Horticulturist, that sort of energy, even the Bull. Those are some of the archetypes you might see attached to Taurus energy. And the Earth Keeper archetype is developing a more sacred relationship with the material world and the natural world. It can be a path to deeper presence and appreciation. Presence meaning you're in the moment. And you can have a sacred relationship with the material world, with your body, through dance. Dance is one way. Sacred, ecstatic dance. If you're into movement, just moving your body in whatever way feels right and good in the moment will suffice. Drinking tea, water, coffee, mindfully, making it mindfully, being mindful about what you put in your body. Your first and last meals of the day can be ritualized so that you're able to drop into what your body needs and wants, because that type of full-on body wisdom is useful energy. It's part of intuition. And then when I say path to deeper presence, it is being comfortable in your own skin, but also being aware what those sensations are trying to communicate to you, what these feelings are trying to communicate to you. So, I think we're going to wrap it up right about here. And I'm going to leave you with a thought. And it's this: true abundance flows from relationship, not possession. The Taurus archetype teaches us that security comes from not what we grasp. That sticky spiderweb type energy may actually stop us, keep us from connecting deeply with the rhythm and the resources of life itself. So, next episode we're going to explore Gemini, the cosmic messenger, and how the hero begins to gather information and make vital connections after establishing a secure foundation which Taurus provides. So feel free to reflect and ask questions of your chart. Get it out and ask questions. How do I experience right relationship? How do I want to steward the earth? How do I want to explore materialism? How do I want to embody the Taurus energy in my life? Would be some questions to ask. Because we're interested in navigating the balance between stability and growth. You can have both. It just requires mindfulness, okay, and presence. And with that being said, thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate you all. And until next time, peace and astro magic.